All right, guys. Well, welcome to our March edition movement meetup. New time. This is kind of came on by popular request as we were trying to get as many people involved as we possibly can, not only in the country here, but obviously across the world. And so we thought we'd give a Sunday a shot. I do want to be respectful of people's time, being that it is a Sunday, so we'll go ahead and get started. I know that most of us on here are obviously very, very familiar with our guest. For those listening potentially to this in the weeks coming, I do want to introduce Dr. James Rudd, I'm sorry, as our special guest today. He is currently a senior lecturer in physical education at Liverpool John Moores University, as well as an adjunct researcher at Victoria University in Melbourne. Spent most of his PhD focusing on skill acquisition, motor skill development, more specifically in childhood. And obviously today we're going to kind of take this, as development across the lifespan. Obviously it starts at childhood, but where does that leave us after we begin to mature and grow? He's also coming out with a book, if it's not already out, right? Nonlinear Pedagogy and the Athletic Skills, the Contemporary Approaches for Understanding and Enhancing Physical Literacy. It's quite the title. But I guess first and foremost, why don't we just, I first of all appreciate you giving us your time here, James. And why don't you, I'll give you a couple seconds here to kind of discuss that book and give yourself a little plug for it, and then we'll get started.
I've changed the title actually, Rich, now. I'm just trying to remember what it is because it was such a mouthful. And look, first of all, it's not my book. It's a partnership between a number of authors. In fact, it's not an edited book, but there are 7 of us all together have written this book on physical literacy. So, and we've really, building off some of the papers published over the last few years, it's trying to take an ecological approach to physical literacy and exploring the historical roots of the term is how we start the book, and seeing why the term is needed in our current society. And then we explore different pedagogical models, which are all based around contemporary approaches to skill acquisition, so around ecological dynamics. But I'm very lucky. I'm leading it, but I'm with esteemed colleagues. So who've worked on a book with me is Keith Davies, Jai Chow, Kurt Sabelsberg, Ian Renshaw, Danny Newcomb, and Will Roberts. So yeah, it's a cracker, and it was really great to be able to coordinate and learn from those guys. And yeah, so it's a real collaborative effort. It's out June the 28th, I believe. I can pop it
nice, good
for people, but yeah, I'll pass it on to you guys. So it's out at the beginning of summer. As I say, real collaborative effort, really trying to unpack physical literacy in about 200 pages. So we did a fairly decent job, I think. But yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you all, and thanks for that great introduction. I forgot we had that catch up before, so it was good because I was like, oh god, how have you found out all that stuff? So that's good.
The internet, man. I googled your name and all that popped up.
It's a scary place. No, it's great. It's great. Cheers, Rich. And lovely to meet so many familiar faces. Thanks a lot, Rich, for inviting me on. Shawn, Tyler, great to see you again. I'm sure we've got to catch up sometime soon, organised. But and obviously other familiar faces, Marianne, Hajiv, love to see you down the bottom there, and everyone else, welcome, and look forward to just having a good discussion with you all.
Well, so what I think we'll do here to get started, obviously our guiding topic is this idea of development across lifespans. I know that you and obviously some of your colleagues here recently have come out with a few papers discussing these ideas. One in particular, the wayfinding paper that you and Carl and Sam and Keith were on. And so I guess kind of broadly here, and you can kind of take this, where you feel like you need to take it, but could you just potentially discuss the idea or the concept of wayfinding and kind of how that came about for you guys, and how you think this idea of wayfinding can move through timescales, can move across the development of timescales through the lifespan, obviously beginning with the youth, because that's where you guys do a fair amount of your work. But obviously I think wayfinding, after reading the paper, applies to more than just younger population. So I guess, could you just kind of give us a brief overview of wayfinding and what you guys wanted to get across with that?
Yeah, sure. So this was Carl Woods's, it's his paper. He's really led it and was exploring some Tim Ingold's work and asked me to sort of help contribute and develop it. So as you're seeing, a lot of mine and Carl's research, especially ones he leads, I tend to write the physical education kind of. We explore the lifespan in many ways. So he will look at high performance sport end, but I will take the same messages and try to develop them and put them across from a physical education. And I've got to say, the wayfinding paper is my is probably one of my favorite papers to have been involved in, and lucky, because it's a special paper. So if you haven't read it, it's an open access paper which we can pop on the link, and it's been interesting. It's been really well received, but it has had some people taking little bites out of it. But to be honest, it's nothing compared to. I'm sure Carl won't mind me mentioning, but we had one of our reviewers was a very, so when you're publishing these papers, you get them peer reviewed, and it was by a very esteemed ecological psychologist, say probably the ecological psychologist in the field. And thanks, Tyler. And yeah, he really kind of challenged us with many ways of how we're using these terms and using the idea of wayfinding. So from his perspective, it's very much a traveling a journey across, transporting from one landscape to another landscape, and really put on that side. And we agreed with that, but we also wanted to really get some of that, take some of that skill acquisition aspects around it. So it's about developing, for me, developing a deepening knowledge of that environment and the environments you're traversing and traveling around and through. And that's really, yeah, developing that kind of knowledge of the environments and becoming more attuned to your environments, having a better goodness of fit, as we've discussed in other papers. So it's not really about acquiring, but more about this, yeah, developing a deeper knowledge and fit. And I tell you, so I knew you. Well, you did prompt me saying I'm going to ask something on wayfinding, and I've got this wonderful photo, which, or not photo, picture, which I'm gonna, if I can share my screen, I'll just, I can. So bear with me. Can you all see this photo? So this is from the book Unflinching, I believe, but this is what wayfinding to me is. Okay, it's about when you see, like, in your landscape. Okay, and it's having that deep, intimate knowledge of these landscape and being able to read that environment, and as you traverse through that. And sometimes I think in today's society, and I bring this up in the physical literacy book, and me and Carl are working on another paper at the moment, but with technologies, we potentially dampen that kind of knowledge of our environment. We don't attend to the important information, be it the shoals of fish or the way the currents are moving in the lanes. We don't see the stars and navigate through using those. And we almost, yeah, become, we see ourselves walking on top of an environment rather than being an integral, intricate part of that environment, and getting that deeper knowledge, more attunement, which helps us navigate or wayfind through that environment. And I love this photo because I think the more you look at it, the more you notice, and more as you, in our current society, which is always trying to grab your attention through one way or another, we potentially don't attune or attend to the right things, or not the right things, but necessarily the things which are actually important for our health and well-being, and important to us being fulfilled for us. So this is kind of where we see this, and yeah. So, and I just love this picture. I think it's Unflinching. It's a really fascinating book. It's by a it's an American. He basically created this book. I should go. It's my next room. I might get it in a minute. But it was his PhD. So what he did, his PhD was through a comic, and he kind of took it through. And one of his pictures, I found this picture in it, which was, yeah, just a beautiful picture. But yeah, so that's kind of, to me, what wayfinding is. And it's about this. You could use it in sport. We aren't acquiring knowledge. decorative with knowledge or rules based, but it's more this deepening fit and a deepening understanding of that performance environment, of that context, which allows us to navigate that bit better through it, etc., and being able to adapt across. So yeah, I guess that is there any questions? I see something flashing up. I'm not sure if there was, or
Just a
sorry, it's
couple
the
of
first one of
comments.
these I've met too. So
Yeah, a couple of comments in there. I mean, I guess, and I'm kind of asking more of a rhetorical question, but we can certainly elaborate on it. Being that is what you believe wayfinding to be, are we as coaches and practitioners, how much are we getting in the way, and how much can we affect the ability for an individual to wayfind by, well, a number of different things, but are you guys finding that coaches and practitioners, and I know maybe you can speak particularly to the younger kids, the physical education aspect, but are we getting in the way?
Oh, I don't think we're not intentionally. I think all coaches, all teachers, we're all trying our best to do, and sometimes I think if we had a bit of better understanding of motor learning, of some of these more contemporary theories to it, I think it could support our practices and make us better understand that. Obviously, like that picture I've shown you, being able to attend to important features of an environment. If you've got a coach, and again, the paper I had out this week, we kind of touched on it about loud pedagogies, and if we're loud, think of this as, I always like to use this, and I think it was Carl who showed me to us. Honestly, the guy's pretty amazing, but he was saying, and we were talking, and it was about think about when you're walking in a street, and it's an obvious thing, but if you can hear a car alarm going off, you can't hear the birds in the trees, you can't hear anything else, you can't attune to other pieces of information or other important features. So if we're trying to be a bit too much on top, it could be anything really, but we're being quite, it could be loud or quite corrective, etc. Potentially they're attuning to us, but we're not tuning to the wider important features in the landscape. So yeah, I really do think there is a not an it's never someone just I don't think they're doing it vindictively or anything like that. I just think, but generally, I think there is a case if we take this idea of attunement and developing a deeper knowledge of our environment, but potentially we can get in the way of that process if through our pedagogical approaches. And you could do that even, I like it. And it's funny, like the last thing, well, before I pass back to you, is actually, I've got my second years at the moment, and we're looking at this, like we're exploring pedagogies and how if we had some coaches, well, me delivering an ecological approach to children in a school setting. And then I had another coach who was leading a more teacher-led direct one. But what I found is I was re-watching. I did these videos 2 years ago or so, quite early on when I was looking at nonlinear pedagogy. And one thing I noticed when I was doing it, even though I was trying really hard to utilize an ecological approach, just because of the way I'd been brought up, the way I'd been taught, and everything else, still bits of that was sneaking in constantly. And it's not something we can just suddenly go bang, off we go. I'm now delivering an ecological approach, and hey ho, I'm really that's it. It doesn't work like that. You have to keep kind of reflecting and looking at it. And it was interesting because I was rewatching those videos and going, oh my god, I suck at this. And yeah, it's just over time I'm just still trying to get a bit better at it, using different tools out there. Danny Newcomb's environmental design principles, taking bits of an athletic skills model, taking Jade's nonlinear pedagogy, which I really love. That people don't look at that enough, I don't think. But yeah, just and keep doing it. But yeah, so yeah, the short answer is yeah, I think you can, Rich.
And what I think we're seeing it. And I mean, obviously, that's where I think the beauty in these papers are, is it really it points out as to how that might be, and that's what I've really been pulling from the last three in particular, which has been pretty cool. So, you guys, I guess I'll open this up. Do you guys have there any questions that are pertinent to what we've been talking about here last couple minutes?
Well, I'll jump in there. I had my hand raised temporarily, but I pulled it down. I thought you'd picked up on it. But first of all, James, thank you so much for being on. Always a pleasure, my friend. I definitely shared the paper in there, and it's one of my favorite personally. I've read it a number of times. We actually, I believe you saw, we actually utilized it as the vehicle for our conversation for the Movement Academy the other day, and had a really rich conversation surrounding what that actually means and what that means specifically to practitioners in the field, and how we can potentially be that environment architect or the way shower, if you will. But I love the notion of it. And one of the things I want to bring up, and it's, I believe it's somewhere around page 4 or 5, you guys mentioned the term actively self-regulating. Can you kind of already are like unpacking that idea, but I think for the listeners, and I've had this question asked to me a little bit, what did you guys mean specifically by actively self-regulating as I'm navigating my way through a landscape and I'm deeply entangled with that landscape? What does that mean to you as an author?
I'd say it's attending. So it's attending to important feature. I think it's words can be quite tough at times. So yeah, I would say it's what was the word again? Sorry, one more, Tyler. What was the exact word which was used? So I haven't got the paper open in front of me.
I'll go ahead and pull it up here, actually, to make it a little bit easier for everyone. If you guys don't mind seeing some of my highlights on the paper here, bear with me just a moment.
Should maybe drop Carl a WhatsApp and bring him in. So.
I saw that he actually liked the tweet a few minutes ago. So, but right here, it's under the wayfinding a process underpinned by perception action coupling. And it's, as you can see, I have it in a different shade here. It was something I thought it was quite nice. And I know you and I offline have talked about actively right here, actively self-regulate or actively self-regulating during performance. And I just am curious, like coming from the author, it's always amazing to hear like what you and Carl and Sam and Keith and others are really what you meant by that, because I like it personally.
Yeah, I think it's hard because, right, self-regulate to start with. This isn't something we consciously do. I think this is an important point to make here. It's not about we are actively trying to self-regulate our behaviors. It's about here. I imagine, and as I say, Carl's written this bit, so we'd have to probably speak to Carl to get a definitive answer.
I should have brought him in. My apologies.
Yeah, no, it's all right. So, but yeah, I guess it's not something consciously potentially we're trying to do, but it's about attending to important information, which can help us, attending to that information, which can help us within our performance environment at that time. So something I always, and I think this links back to pedagogy. Mm-hmm. Quite often, if we can use, I talk a lot about the importance of exploration and like searching. And I think that's really important for transfer. So for instance, when I'm working with children, I'll always be, okay, can you show me a different way? How else could you do that? Because what I'm trying to pull out there is for them to search and through that search will self-regulate, self-organize, okay? But they're actively seeking and searching within the environment, okay? So it's important because we're not always going to be there, and we don't always want to be there. So when you're potentially, I always think of this around swimming, okay? So when we train children in swimming pools quite often and go, well, we teach them to swim there. And I'm all for that, and I think it's really important. But it's not, we can't just go put them in that environment, which is warm water, light's brilliant, they've got a lifeguard on the side and think, okay, and teach them their technical strokes and go, okay, they're going to be a good swimmer. I'm going to be able to swim in all environments, because that's not the case. If you go into a river, lake, it's freezing cold, it's visibility, you can't see anything, okay, and so the environment is very different. But the way I teach, so bear with me with this, I guess, because what I'm wanting to do in all my pedagogy, whatever environment is, and using those type of things, is that when they enter into an environment potentially where their skills will transfer, but they're actively seeking, not relying on what I'm going to say, but okay, trying to attune to important features in that environment, if they know what they are or not, but they're searching. for doing this. So they're actively self-regulating to a performance environment. That's where I would go with this. Now, again, with papers, it's a bit tricky. Like, I obviously work very closely with Carl on them, but I'm not the lead author on something. So you, as you'll know, if you publish, you tend to, you support them through that process. I'll have a conversation about certain bits, but I won't write it word for word. But as you say, it is a collaborative process. But yeah, does that kind of get to it? Do you have other thoughts on it, Tyler?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, I think it does. The very first thing you said right when I asked the question was attending. And what I like by that, and you followed it up with, it's not necessarily conscious. And then the examples that you were giving specifically with how you work with youngsters are you're educating their search, or you're essentially educating their attention and intention to how they may go about searching through guiding questions, which I really love, because you're giving the ownership to them as the organism. So that way that you have that intact or mutual relationship between the performer and the environment. But yet, one thing that you mentioned in there, which I want to pull out for the listeners, is as organisms, we're searching regardless of whether there's a coach present, whether there's a coach that that isn't present, or a teacher or a guide, whatever it may be. But as practitioners, we can help educate that search to potentially rich information areas within the environment that will allow for them to actively self-regulate their behavior.
Yeah,
or
we don't want to tell them what to look at, but we're showing them where to.
Yeah, no,
we're showing them where to look, but we're not telling them what to see. Okay, because there's a subtle difference around that. No, I'm completely on board. It's funny because you come across these terms, Tyler. Like, if you look in feminology and that, they'll talk about intentionality, and when you get to the roots of what they mean by that, it means to look out or to look out. It's not an internal something which is internal. It's about looking out into your environment. So you start to see a lot of these crossovers in a language and around these. But yeah, no, I completely agree.
I just thought it was a really nice way to frame it, and I totally understand. And I guess I'm a little bit fortunate, being the fact that you, Carl, and I we've had discussions specifically pertaining to this before months ago. But why I personally liked it, and I like the usage of the word, or the words of actively self-regulate or self-regulating, is you're deeply entangled and embodied within that particular context at that time as that learner. And so you're constantly exchanging energy and information that specifies those opportunities. But as a practitioner, we may be able to help that exploratory process, potentially by wayfinding aids, which you guys mentioned in the paper, or questions, like you do a nice job of just helping that young learner through. Show me how many different ways you might be able to do that, or could you potentially do that a different way? Or I like that idea, and I think that's a very simple way to help educate the intention, and then in turn the attention of the athlete in general, or of the wayfinder. So I like the idea, and that's the reason why I was asking the question. I was just curious from your perspective, my friend.
Does anybody else have anything they would like to shoot his way?
I wonder if we need to be a little bit careful here, even when we're talking about where to look and that sort of thing. I think sometimes people listen to us and they think that we know where to look. And if you go back to the Tim Ingold thing, he'll talk about transmission, but it's not from us to them. It's a co-creation thing where we're doing it together with them. And yes, as the more experienced partner in the activity, the coach has a background of experience that is way, way greater perhaps than the athlete, although that might not always be the case. You could be coaching somebody who's got more experience than you in that space, but you're still helping. But the point is that even in that educative teaching type role, where you are supposedly the master with the student, the focus that Tim Ingold would come up with is about leading out, where we're working with them to see what we can see together. And it might be something that neither us nor them have seen before. and what we're attuning to might be completely new. It might overlap entirely with our own experience. But then the other point is that as a great coach, we might actually be called in to work with an elite athlete whose ability to attune to that environment, there's a reason they're the elite athlete and we're not. They're attuning better than we are. But in all of these cases, it's working with them to search. So the wayfinding bit is, I suppose, for both of us. Is that a fair way to put it, James?
Yeah, I would. I like that, Greg. No, I agree. I think it is a very much a co-adaptive, co-designing, exploring together. Again, what children see, the effectivities they bring to the table, and are very different to the ones of which a coach or teacher will have in way. And so they're seeing the world in a different way, and we need to respect that and appreciate that. But I think in something I've always been playing for, and regardless of what age or ability, skill level you're working of, it's understanding the symmetry between the individual and the environment, and not seeing it as an asymmetry. And that's like, we use words like such as intentionality. It can sometimes mean as it makes people think of being something within, but it's not. It's that interaction between environment. And so when I'm coaching, I have to keep pulling myself really back to that. It's as simple as that. It's going, okay, here am I trying to educate them to two bits in the environment. Sometimes it will be like, look, John, just look there. Do you know what I mean? Just look, just open your eye. And I'm like, oh, okay, get it. So, but other times it's not, and definitely the more subtle way of showing and yeah, leading out together in this idea of inskillment that's what we want to get to. And I think that's really important, because you're not always going to be by their side. So if they suddenly want to attune to you, you're kind of not done your job, because like they're not being able to attend. So yeah, no, Greg, I like that.
And
I like what Marianne's put in the chat as well.
Oh, I can't keep up with both.
So it's a shame that people watching afterwards might not pick this up, but Marianne's got this wonderful habit of bringing us back to the fact that actually, if you're working with a border collie doing search and rescue, or you're working with a horse, then it's a good self-check for us in how we're talking about things, because if the way we're talking about this coaching wouldn't apply in those contexts, it's a good reason to ask another question.
Tyler, did you have something there?
There's different sensory systems. Like, I guess smell there is a much stronger drug. Yeah, we're never a child. We may have an idea. We've been a child ourselves. We've never been a dog.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Can you hear me?
Hiya.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I know, I'm sorry. I always do that. I think because I spent so much time working with horses and dogs as well, and particularly all those years training search dogs. And it was such a great experience for me, because I knew I had absolutely no way of understanding their lived experience or the information they were picking up. But my role was to help my dog to be able to work an area, air scenting, and pick up a live human being in a big remote area. And so my role was to become attuned to my dog and the way in which my dog behaved and interacted. So catching him, like lift his nose to pick up a scent or move, so that I could feed him into these areas. And I think what I absolutely love about that picture, James, actually, is it looks like the maps of air currents we used to use both for the search training and also for paragliding. Because in paragliding, we also need to use information that we can't see, but we can infer by doing things like watching birds spiral, to go and get height, watching water vapor above trees in the morning in the Alps, things like that, so you have to become attuned to completely different information that you would normally use in these different environments. I absolutely love it.
And James, I know it's sometimes difficult to both obviously have a fruitful conversation and read the chat box. Believe me, I've been there, so I completely understand. But just so you know, when Greg was talking, and he didn't specifically say representative, but he was talking about co-design and leading out and co-adaptiveness. And so I shared your other recent paper, Representative Co-Design, with Carl, just because I feel as though at least some of the individuals on the call work with athletes on a regular basis, whether it be for court, field, or the other. And so I thought that was a phenomenal paper to tie to the wayfinding paper because of the notion of their experience or utilizing your experiential and their experiential knowledge, but in a way that deepens their knowledge of the environment. So I thought that was a phenomenal one to add.
No, it's just I think sometimes we take it for granted. I saw it's really interesting. Oh, interesting. It was in the news. It's probably a few months ago now, but I think Tottenham were playing an away game in the Champions League, and the coaches went out and inspected the pitch and were like, "Yeah, it's all good." Came back with Jose Mourinho in it, and the players went out and they started kicking a ball, and they're like, "The goals are too small." They were like, or they hadn't even kicked the ball. They just looked at the gut. They're like, "The goals are too small." So, what do you mean? They went out and they measured it, and in fact, the coaches had all missed it. But actually, the goals were not regulation. So the soccer got posts and goals were not regulation that they hadn't. But it just shows you how attuned, as you say, an elite athlete potentially is to their performance environment, and we could potentially. So that's what's so important to getting at co-design and at that way of communicating, because they're attending potentially to far more sophisticated or picking up information which we aren't aware of in that environment. So I think that is it's so important part of our job.
Oh, it certainly is, and I honestly, I maybe from my perspective, I feel the ego maybe just gets in the way. I mean, that requires a coach then to maybe admit they don't know, or maybe admit they don't have as much expertise as the person they're coaching and things like that. So that's where I think, at least in my experience, where I've seen us get in the way of that process is not being okay with actually having to co-design things with that. I mean, instead of it being a team, it's got to be a no. If I don't have all the answers, how am I supposed to justify myself and my position? And I mean, obviously, we all don't believe that to be true, but I think that's where people get tied up in this. Is that's a hard thing to do for some people, because you kind of have to relinquish control. You have to be okay with being wrong in the moment. You have to be okay with taking advice from potentially younger players who you think are less experienced. So but it's very, very good insight. Does anybody else have any other particular questions related to that? Otherwise, Zach put one in the chat that I think would be good to discuss. All right, well, I'll go for it here. So Zach asks, we've been talking about sport in particular, but he says, I wonder how all this fits in with a child who may not be interested in competitive sports, but the parents or educators involved in their lives still want to help them grow up, with an appreciation for movement, health, physical lifestyle. How can wayfinding be a part of, I guess, a non-sport situation?
It's not sport. It's not like we can use it. We can use wayfinding to probably enrich how we go about our coaching. If we're in competitive sport, there are lessons we can learn, and probably a philosophy we could look to follow, which maybe help us develop better relationships. Because one, you're going to be co-designing. You're not going to be telling. It opens up a two-way dialogue potentially, and the language you're using is a softer language about trying to guide, support, more this different type of pedagogical role we would take on. So, but really, in the book we don't even focus on competitive sport, especially not. Well, Ian does a little bit in the later chapters in high performance, and Danny, but overall the book's about unstructured play. So physical literacy, it's about really the importance of play and supporting children to play at the moment, for instance. And I completely get this, and I think this is such an important question Zach's brought up, because I think competitive sport runs a risk of putting off a lot of children to being active and physically active, And actually, and this is why. Let me step back. Actually, so I mentioned here on physical literacy, if you can entertain me for a few minutes. There's been a lot of talk. What is it? How do you define it? It was, and that is, it's like honestly pages and pages of academic texts on trying to understand what it is. But for me, what's far more important is where it's come from, and where it's come from is actually Margaret Whitehead, PE teacher for 50 years or so, and working in 1993, what she kind of came out and said was children's play spaces are diminishing. Their opportunities to play are becoming less and less. And this is for two reasons. First is to do with our society. Okay, 1993, I don't know, Nickelodeon on TV, Sky, sit down. Children's play spaces have been moving from outdoors to indoors. Your Nintendos, your Super Nintendos, your Mega Drives, all around at that age. I was playing them all. So you can see though, top children's play environments were moving to indoors and potentially sedentary. So they weren't wayfinding around their local environments. Okay, they're not in their back gardens. They're not in the streets playing. So that's one side. And then this other bit, which links to competitive sports. She was really worried about the pedagogies she was seeing coming in, being very much about trying to coach children to be athletes or performers rather than supporting them to play. And actually, where before children would have just unstructured play, we were putting an adult into those environments to potentially direct them on what to do and how to do it. And this is the skills you've got to learn, and this is how you do it. So their play was being diminished. So I think one thing which wayfinding can teach us around this is really the importance of this kind of unstructured play and allowing children, and not seeing that as like a secondary leisure activity or diminishing going, oh, they're just playing. Marianne will see this. Horses play, dogs play, animals grow, we play. There's developmentally, evolutionary, real important reasons we do that. And so really we need to respect that for in the learning and support when children are invested in co-designing, creating unstructured play activities with their friends. There's a lot of going on there, physically, cognitive, socially, all of it, which we should be supporting and allowing and trying to create these environments to support it more. So I think potentially performance environments can, especially, they can be really, really powerful if done well, actually, to support a group of teenage boys or a young group through, like, become very, really help them through a difficult period, a different path, and can be. But at the same time, if we have this more loud, follow what I say, do what I say, this is how it needs to be done, what do you mean you can't do it, this is how you do it, now you do it. If we have that more kind of mantra, this more louder kind of pedagogies on, well, then potentially we do run the risk of saying, oh, well, you're not sporty. Physical activity is not for you, or being sporty not for you. So something I don't. Again, I'm really bad at answering questions directly here, Zach. I'm sorry, but
I personally think that was spot on.
That was, yeah.
James, I thought that was spot on, and it's interesting, and that was a great question by Zach. You had mentioned that actually just recently. Obviously, you said it in a different way this time, which was nice to hear. But on the Perception Action podcast that Rich and Mark and Michael were on not too long ago, and you made the mention of like children moving indoors, and this is over the past couple of decades. And immediately I thought about when I was younger, and I'm 38. I'll tell everybody just because it'll give you an idea of what was around at that time frame. But I thought about how I used to go and play in the woods when I was younger on a regular basis, catching fish and hanging out. And I used to jump on the trampoline. We'd make up games that would have a basketball hoop that was available. I mean, yes, I played video games, but I wasn't driven indoors as much as what I see today's society being. And so I just think it's a wonderful way to bring about notion of wayfinding as it exists across the landscape versus it just being for organized sports. And so I think that's one of the best mentions that you made towards the end of that, which I think is wonderful for everyone. So thank you.
No problems. Greg, the thing I was talking about is from a She went to Australia and did it. It's a conference proceedings on what physical literacy is. So it's not that paper. But yeah, it was a conference proceeding from her talk in 1993 in Adelaide, I believe it was.
Shawn, you got something?
Yeah, James, probably the one thing that comes to mind, and the same thing that we often hear at Emergence when we offer these ideas or many like them, from a theoretical perspective and a way of viewing or a framework of viewing the movement skill acquisition process as a whole. From many practitioners on the outside that are sort of working on the inside, they'll say, so what? Who cares? What are all these theoretical underpinnings really for? Or why do we have to view it in this way? What would you say to those types of individuals that maybe would offer them some sort of practical advice or suggestions that they can immediately start to integrate within their own learning environments to assist them in this process and maybe allow that individual to become a better wayfinder?
Yeah, great question, Shawn. And it's a hard one because people can get put off sometimes by or not put off, I guess, but just kind of go, well, yeah, do we really need to know all this? Do we need to understand this? And the answer is probably not, but an appreciation really helps, like, guide you, self-check you as you go. For me, the biggest thing I'm kind of at a moment anyway is going, just see it as like the environment, individual interaction is everything. That's what's important to appreciate and understand here, and try to not to I think, especially in highly dynamic and charged situations, we just suddenly kind of focus on the individual and what the individuals, and they've got to try harder, do this, do better. But before you make that jump, try to look at that environment which they're navigating. What is it? Take a step back and go, right, they're doing that, but what's going on? Not with them, but what's in front of them, or what other dynamic? What could be causing this for them to do that? And I think for me, it's that minute of just self-checking, because actually you may go, oh, it's right, it's because of this. So if I change this in the environment, they're going to get it, or they're going to do something. So it's that appreciation for the individual environment. And my other thing is just around, yeah, you're questioning, I guess. It's being more outward facing, like not, yeah, trying to, for instance, a question I use, actually, and I use this in like more with older children as well, like in secondary school, and it's more about what are you seeing? Like it sounds so in like a timeout. I coach basketball, so one thing I always do, I love basketball, but in my timeouts, I always think, well, I have more control over like maybe changing the wider system. So being what the team's doing, I can make wider system changes. But to help me do that, seeing or doing that time. So a lot of my timeouts, the start anyway, will be about questioning them about, right, what's going on, what are you seeing, what's happening here, just trying to get them to give me stuff, and then I'll make whatever change I think is going to be. But it's kind of more of a self-check. Is this going to work or is it not going to work? But I guess it's important to appreciate, there's two things there. One, it's about me appreciating the importance of the wider environment. So I'm kind of trying to look at that, not just what my individuals are doing. Okay. And then the second bit is about really trying to understand the information they're attending to within that, because that's really important. That helps me understand what's going on. So does that answer your question? I don't know if I have there, Shawn, but yeah. So, okay.
We have another question here pop up in the chat box that kind of plays off of that explanation. Marianne's asking that she's interested in how we as a coach know that they're attuning to the information that we're trying to intend them to. I guess if that makes sense. I mean, can you kind of go about explaining how that might work?
I don't know. It depends. It depends on the task. I say I don't know. I think it depends on the activity we're trying to do? Are we trying to work towards divergence or convergence? So if we have this kind of very like convergent, we're focusing towards a very specific goal, then we probably can problem solve or ask questions to figure out and work with them, co-design, etc., to get to it. But I don't actually think always trying to get to a specific solution to a task is necessarily the best thing to do, especially with me and children. Very rarely do I work towards convergence, so trying to teach them specifically how to do a specific thing. It's more about divergent movement, finding different ways, doing it different ways. It looks a lot more like play, and it's a lot more, looks much more unstructured, because actually I'm trying to help them develop their own movement signature, explore a range of develop attractor states and develop a broad range of attractor worlds, etc. you want to do. But we are not trying, to work, for me anyway, about to turn them into something. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to help them find their way through that. And there's a subtle difference there. So again, I don't think I've Marianne, just jump on. Okay, good.
Hi, James. Yeah, hi. I was just listening to you, actually. Thank you, and I'm loving this. Thank you so much, James. It's brilliant to listen. I was just thinking more, how we can start to pick up cues that would tell us whether or not the people we're working with are actually attending to specifying information while they are learning sort of basic coordination. It's really difficult to tell whether it's coordination and calibration or whether they're just actually trying to pay attention to something other than the specifying information. I hope that makes sense. I had
go on, sorry.
I had a bit of a like wow moment today. So I sort of like went out with my brother to have a little play on the golf course, because we live on a golf course and I don't play golf, but I was like, well, I can't go anywhere else. I'll go and have a play. But I put my glasses on, which I never wear unless I'm driving, and they're only like a minus 1.25. So they're not, they're not like Coke bottom bottles or anything like that. And I didn't think about it until I missed the first like 10 balls. I'd either hit them or miss them, hit the top or miss them. I took my glasses off, hit every single one of them. I thought, wow, that's amazing. I've just like, my calibration is so completely out. But I would have never thought about that even a year ago. I would have just thought it was something to do with the coordination, not to do with the fact that it was a perception thing. And so it's really, when I think it's really hard, I think, for us as coaches to know maybe whether or not the people we're working with are attuning to what we would call specifying information, or what I would call non-specifying information accidentally.
I think it's a lot we could actually learn here from like the great research which has been done from in historically around like information process, like retention, looking at how things have, we know in performance potentially, well, so let's take variability of practice. We're not going down a cognitive approach, but if we look there and look at some of the great studies they've done in that field, what they see is you see variability of practice at the end of the performance at session. They will not have performed as well as, say, someone who's done blocked practice, who kind of repeated the skills. All right.
Yeah.
But when you come back a week later for retention, the block practice have gone more or less back to their baseline, while your variable practice has stayed more or less where it was. So we can see learnings taking place. Now, we're not maybe prescribing to that theory, but we can appreciate the messiness of potentially going through that process of a learning and helping children attend. May continue. So I think there's something there. So one would be retention, but where I think it's really, if we want to see if it's is around, Marianne, you on a golf course, like if you end up in a bunker.
Yeah.
All right. So actually we look at a transfer test. Okay. Different environment, different dynamics going on, different club, etc. Does it work there, or is it not? I think there's something around actually, and I think especially if we're looking at skill adaptability, it's maybe not going, well, how well are they performing on a retention, but well, can they take that and put it into a different environment? So I think that's very important, that transfer across. help us.
I really like that, James. Thank you. That is a really such a useful thing to think about, that we recognize that if we change the environment slightly or we come back the next day, that we shouldn't expect skill fade if they, necessarily if they have been attending to that information, or certainly not a huge amount, not like me without my glasses or with my glasses.
It makes me wonder.
Question there from Tyler. Sorry, just what did you shoot today, Marianne? What did you go around in?
Fresh air by the sound of it.
I did.
How many golf balls did you lose? That's how I measure my golf. It's on how many balls I actually managed not to lose.
Yeah.
I didn't lose any, but only because I can't hit them far enough to lose them. But as soon as I took my glasses off, they all went in a straight line, and I hit the bottom, and they went up in the air and in a straight line. Clearly not as far as my brothers. We didn't play a full game, so we had 6 balls each and just did the first and the last hole. But yeah, I need to play more often, especially as I live on one. It feels a bit
to be honest,
crazy
I'm
not
very
to.
jealous, to be fair. But anyway, so someone else. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just thinking, all of us here are interested in the research context. So even if we do team games and all that sort of thing, when the moment we start talking about skill development, the first instinct is to go to something like that, hitting a golf ball, that sort of thing. And yet the conversation's about coordination. But just notice Mark's on the call, and you're looking at 6-year-olds playing with a kick around ball and the rest of it. And the what counts as specifying information when you're playing, even if it's just 3-on-3. I'm not sure that even with somebody as experienced as Mark, that he would actually be able to say what is all of the specifying information in any one situation. It isn't cut and dried like that. You can't, there's so much that actually trying to be explicit about it would be really, really hard, which is probably one of the reasons why on the research front, it's a lot easier just to get one person trying to hit a golf ball. But we tend to possibly find that our research focus ends up with us going back to coordination. And there's something about that learning to filter that's quite different for me, I think, in the team environment. But James, you're working with physical literacy with young people. Where does that fit into physical literacy? Where does that development of the filter between SNO and specifying information fit with a focus on physical literacy?
For me, for physical literacy, okay, let's go there. So for me, at the heart of physical literacy, and if you look at all Margaret's stuff, and you look at John Kearney's work, you look at Dean Dudley's work, you look at Lisa's work, Barnett's work, who are all people who are investing in physical literacy, but they come from all very different positions, shall we say. One thing they'll all agree on, that movement is at the heart of it. Okay, so how we move and coordination, if you want to go there, Greg. So for me, functional movement skills is at the heart of physical literacy. And it's something we can see, okay? We can see children's, how they are interacting through some functional movement skills. That functional movement skills taking a cognitive, effective, it's their way of showing us that part of it. And actually, the more us trying to support them to learn new functional ways or movement skills to within that environment and context will create new information and open up new information opportunities for that child or that individual. It doesn't have to be a child here, okay, which will support their physical literacy. So for instance, here I was using this today. It's like we do need to support. I think you need to help children develop physical literacy, but this is what I mean, is kind of this functional movement skills. So if we're on a stream and there's 2 children and there's some stepping stones across the stream, child A may just bound across no problem. They have a goodness of fit in that environment, but those stepping stones, even though they've got a bit slippery with some moss on them, the length they are apart from each other, with the effectivities they have, they can cross that. Child B can't at this point in time. Our job is to support them, whatever that may be. It may be strength training, I don't know, or it could be something else. But it's to help them develop the effectivities to support them to be able to find the function, or to be a solution emerges, or they gain a goodness of fit to be able to cross that stream. All right, so it's that, and that's what it means. But it comes to the heart of it, yeah, of physical, which means that development of functional movement skills, because that will allow new information to emerge, new interactions with an environment to happen, new ways to navigate, and so on. Mark, come on, you have not said anything yet. I see you hiding there in the background. How you doing, mate? You're a physical literacy guru here. Come on, what do you reckon?
He's got his mic off.
Yeah. Hi, how you doing?
Good to see you, mate.
What do I reckon I'm up?
You weren't even listening.
I was, yeah, actually I was, because do you remember the video I sent you of my 2 kids climbing?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so you have a 6-year-old and 8-year-old climbing up a rock when they're leaving school on the way home, and that's what I showed you. What was interesting was the 8-year-old climbed it easily. He understood. My 6-year-old understood, and this is also a change in information, that his arms weren't long enough to grab a ledge. So he actually asked his brother for help. So his brother just said, okay, and just put out one hand. So he grabbed one hand with his left and used that to elevate himself up to the ledge. So that for me is acting on information, but it's within your own action capabilities. But also knowing that, I don't have my arms. He actually says himself, my arms in the video in Swedish, my arms aren't long enough. And he's only 6. I think that was kind of interesting. I film my kids a lot when they interact with each other, because they're different ages, so there's different action capabilities. And yeah, I thought that was interesting. That's kind of very like your story with the going across the river and the stones.
Yeah.
So by not actually acting on information, you're also getting insight into somebody being very attuned to the environment. I think, if you understand.
You're putting me back in mind. I can still remember actually being around sort of 5-6 years old, and I was one of the kids that didn't play a lot of soccer. And I used to go along and hang out in the back garden with a kid who did. And my physical literacy was more than a match for this other kid in anything else. I mean, I was riding horses, climbing trees, riding bikes, rollerblading, roller skates back then, swimming, whatever. Physical literacy level wasn't really an issue. But I had no way of tuning in to what on earth he was doing with the ball. And progress in kicking the ball around every break time, lunchtime, and all the rest of it at school and out of school and all the rest of it was always very limited, because I really never got very good at tuning to relevant specifying information. So I was always like about a second behind where I needed to be. And I can't help feeling that there's a parallel bit here to the physical literacy bit. Maybe he's just too darn good for me, but it seemed to be a recurrent theme. And certainly if I was a PE teacher, if I was able to go back and magically get a PE teacher focused on the developmental needs that I had when I was 6 years old, it wasn't about anything I could do with the ball. I just got no idea what this other guy was doing. I don't know what I was tuning into, but it was definitely snow.
Yeah, but you don't, like, you're doing all those other bits. That's fine. That's
yeah,
to be celebrated. We're all different. We're all on our own journeys. We don't need to be prescribed.
I think
by someone else.
James, as we discussed, physical literacy is not a thing you have.
No,
it's an ongoing relationship
between
you live in the environment. It's like this fit. Yeah. It's ongoing and it changes throughout life. And that's what I meant. I think my 6-year-old showed great understanding, if you want to call it physical literacy, at that moment, because he knew he needed just to grab onto something nearer him to pull him up to the ledge. And my brother his brother was tuned into the environment as well by just leaving a hand, not pulling him up, but just putting a hand out. And then the minute he grabbed the ledge, he pulled his hand away. And I just thought that was really, really two people really interacting with kids, interacting with them. So it's just an ongoing interaction. It's not something people possess or have. And I think that was what we've spoken about a lot. People like to turn it into a commodity and monetize it. And,
Mark, what's interesting about your story with the kids is obviously this isn't in a sporting context necessarily, but it brings about the idea of goal-directed behavior and shared affordances amongst your kids and being able to accomplish something and help both of the individuals accomplish something, but picking up affordances that are going to be more purposeful for them. So I like the idea, and I think about it often because I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I see them interact as well. And I think I learn more about it through the lens of viewing my children.
Yeah, the rock is there to be climbed, and maybe when they're teenagers, it's there to draw graffiti on.
Yeah, no, I like the story. It's a good piggyback on the hopping across the stones that James gave. And I also think you gave something along the lines of you were talking about. I was just listening on the way back. I was on a road trip recently. I was listening to you and James and Rich and Michael on the Perception Action podcast. You were talking something along the lines of there being a meta miles per hour, but essentially a speedometer that was in the middle of Stockholm there, and kids that was kind of a unique story as well that I think begs almost repeating in some ways. But anyway, I digress.
Over to you, James.
No, well, just picking up, that was a wonderful example Mark gave of the importance of the environment and also a respect and appreciation for unstructured play. So the story goes about in Stockholm, Mark could say it, but there was a speed camera was placed in the middle of it. Cars stopped going down that road because they could speed on a different road. And what happened is actually a couple of skateboarders come down and then realize they can set it off, or on their bikes can set it off if they go fast enough. So what do? Ring their mates. They all come down and then they start just having this wonderful time, competitive, challenging each other, to find ways to set off this speed camera. This real intentionality, active self-regulated behavior performances, all this is happening. But then what we do is go, we don't want kids shouldn't be playing there, right? And ban the kids from playing there. But again, it's this idea of play is devalued in our society, and it's a shame because that a lot of learning and positive learning is happening in that environment and development. It's great speed training potentially going on, which again will support them in a competitive environment further down the line, or when they come to you on a Saturday or whatever it is. But yeah,
absolutely.
Well, this is probably a good place to stop, and that was fantastic. And again, you guys are right that it's James, and you said it a number of times on a number of conversations that we've had. It comes down to just allowing the kids to play. If it gets summed up in a couple of simple sentences, I think that does it justice. And I just appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I know it's not just you, but you and your colleagues, and obviously Mark and Carl and Keith, and you guys are putting out some really, really good stuff right now. And I was just having a conversation with Tyler about it the other day, where it's easy to read, it's easy to understand for someone who isn't necessarily an academic. Myself, I'm more obviously a practitioner. I mean, I'm reading this stuff and it's just very well put together. And you guys you're outlining the issues, and you're outlining, okay, so here's the issue. How do we go about fixing it? And it's really awesome to see the work you guys are putting out. So I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Rich, no, look, it's a team effort, and you can't have a better compliment, to be honest, when people are reading and appreciating what you're writing. So for me, it's wonderful, and I know Carl feels the same, and Mark. Yeah, it's a really exciting time, and just hats off to you guys at Emergence, because really love the way you're leading the way in the States with this stuff. I think it's brilliant, and yeah, I'm all for it. Keep it going.
Greatly appreciate it, James. As always, good chatting with you. Thank you so much for today. I know that Carl will likely have a listen back, so he'll hear his name mentioned several times, but thank you again for your time. Everyone else, thank you so much for being on and for the rich conversation. Greatly appreciate it and appreciate the support you guys are giving us. So thank you very much. And definitely check out James's upcoming book, and not just his, obviously, but everyone else.
Take care, everyone. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great night.
Thanks, James. Thanks, guys.
Bye.